Hello, guys. I think I am already live, so I already have written what I'm going to talk about today. So today's topic is gonna be the topic uh, of reading a book. So we don't like reading books. No one does. I don't know why, but not many people enjoy reading books as I enjoy them. I enjoy reading books from the core of my heart. I love reading books. I don't know when I started reading books. Maybe from a very early age I started that habit of reading books. So when I started reading books, it gives me immense pleasure. I think I cannot even describe how peaceful I feel when I read a book, because in the book I can be in the book, I can be the character, I can be whatever character are doing, I can do them, I can feel their feelings, I can actually be in the character and be at the moment. I mean, in that point of their life, I can be there and I can be that very person. So it's like living a life in another world, a world of a novel or world of a book or world of that character. It's amazing. So it gives me immense pleasure. So, but not many people understand that, so we don't read books a lot. But I was watching a movie today. The name of the movie is the Jane Austen book clubs. I mean, Jane Austen, she was a writer in 1800. I mean, she was born in around 1780. I think I just have to look for it. I mean, when he was born, but I'm pretty sure it was 70. Oh, she was born in 1775 and she died very early age. She died in 41 years old when she was 41 years old, 1841. 1817 she died. I actually feel so bad when I saw that she died a long time. I mean, she couldn't live so many years. I actually regretted that because she wrote only six novels, and those six novels were amazing novels and amazing stories. Every novel actually impersonates the feminism. So it's, you can imagine how why I love them in the first place. So today I will start the very thing, very first thing about my book club. I have been thinking about that for a long time, but I couldn't actually act on it. There are several reasons for it, because the people around me, they don't like reading like I do. So I couldn't go to any club, and whenever there are fewer clubs there, of course, but I couldn't join because I didn't have time to exactly be present on their timing, and timing doesn't match, and there are so many reasons for that. And at some point I don't really enjoy people's company. When I read things, I like to read things in private and be into that world in my own zone, not to bother with anything else. So what I'll do is, I will start with the first novel written by Jane Austen in, uh, I think 1814, 1811. It was, sorry, 14. It was Mansfield Park. So the 1811 Sense and Sensibility she started writing, and she published it in 1811, like 200, more than 200 years ago. So you can imagine the plot will be different, the names, the lines, The way the English talk would be different. So today I'm gonna start my book club, my virtual book club, and I will try to post it every day, which is maybe sometimes will not be possible, but I will try to do it. I will be on live like around this time, around 3:30 in the morning, because now is the free time. I don't have anything to do now, so other than sleeping, other than going to sleep. So I will go to sleep after this. Today I will read one page. I'll try to read one page or two paragraphs or as much as I can read from Sense and Sensibility. So I will start now. I hope you enjoy as I enjoy it. Okay? So the first line, the family. Family is very important. So start hearing it. Okay? I'm gonna read it now. Okay, start. The family of Dashwood had been long settled in Sussex. Their estate was large, and their residence was at Norland Park, in the center of their property, where for many generations they had lived in so respectable a manner as to engage the general good opinion of their surrounding acquaintance. That's one sentence, you know. So it's a very long sentence. I will continue. Don't don't mind. The late owner of this estate was a single man who lived to a very advanced age, and who, for many years of his life, had constant companion and a housekeeper in his sister. But her death was happened 10 years before his own, produced a great alteration in his home, for to supply her loss he invited and received into his house the family of his nephew, Mr. Henry Dashwood, the legal inheritor of the Norland estate, and the person to whom he intends to bequeath in it. In the society of his nephew and niece and their children, the old gentleman's days were comfortably spent. His attachment to them all increased. The constant attention of Mr. and Mrs. Henry Dashwood to his wishes, which proceeded not merely from interest but from goodness of heart, gave him every degree of solid comfort which his eyes could receive, and the cheerfulness of children added a relish to his existence. Oh, it's very. This is the first paragraph of the Sense and Sensibility, and it is really, really beautifully put. There are only few sentences, like three, four sentences in this paragraph, but all the sentences are in compound sentences. It's very long, complex sentences. There are a few words which we could not understand in the first place, but I hope you'd like it. I'll post a picture of the page which I will read, and then let you know that what I have read. I hope you will read it. You will continue reading it. So the second paragraph I'm starting. By a former marriage, Mr. Henry Dashwood had one son. By his present lady, three daughters. The son, a steady, respectable young man, was amply provided for by the fortune of his mother, which had been large, and half of which developed on him on his coming of age. By his own marriage, likewise, which happened some afterwards, he added to his wealth. To him Therefore, the succession to the Norland estate was not so really important as to his sisters, for their fortune, independent of what might arise to them from their fathers inheriting their property, could be but small. Their mother had nothing, and their father only £7,000 in his own disposal. For the remaining moiety of his first wife's fortune was also secured to her children, and he had only a life interest in it. So that's the second paragraph. On the first paragraph, we came to know about the family of Dashwood and the Miss Dashwood, who is going to die soon, or he was very old and he has support from his own sister, but his own sister unfortunately died 10 years before he himself died. So when his sister died, his sister was taking care of himself, Mr. Dashwood, but his sister dying, after his sister's death, he had to seek the support from his nephew. His nephew was Henry Dashwood, and Henry Dashwood had one son and three daughters. The son was from his first marriage, and the three daughters are from his second marriage. So the son inherited all the wealth his mother had, but the second wife of Henry Dashwood had no money at all. So the three daughters basically inherited nothing. So for the son, the wealth doesn't really matter. But for the three daughters, the wealth really indeed matters. So the story continues. The old gentleman died. His will was read, and, like almost every other will, gave as much disappointment as pleasure. He was neither so unjust nor so ungrateful as to leave his estate from his nephew, but he left it to him on such terms as destroyed half the value of the bequest. Mr. Dashwood had wished for it more for the sake of his wife and daughters than for himself or his son, but to his son and his son's son, a child of 4 years old, it was secured in such a way as to leave to himself no power of providing for those who were most dear to him, and who most needed a provision by any charge on the state or by any sale of its valuable woods. The whole was tied up. The whole was tied up for the benefit of this child, who, in occasional visits with his father and mother at Norland, had so far gained on the affections of his uncle by such attractions as are by no means unusual in children of 2 or 3 years old, an imperfect articulation, an earnest desire of having his own way, many cunning tricks, and a great deal of noise, as to outweigh all the value of all the attention which for years he had received from his niece and her daughters. He meant not to be unkind, however, and as a mark of his affection for the three girls, he left them £1,000 apiece. Mr. Dashwood's disappointment was at first severe, but his temper was cheerful and sanguine, and he might reasonably hope to live many years, and by living economically lay by a considerable sum from the produce of an estate already large and capable of almost immediate improvement, but the fortune which had been so tardy in coming was his only one 12 month. He survived his uncle no longer, and £10,000, including the late legacies, was all that remained for his widow and daughters. His son was sent for as soon as his danger was known, and to him Mr. Dashwood recommended, with all the strength and urgency which illness could command, the interest of his mother in law and sisters. Mr. John Dashwood had not strong feelings of the rest of the family, but he was affected by a recommendation of such a nature at such a time, and he promised to do everything in his power to make them comfortable. His father was rendered easy by such an assurance, and Mr. John Dashwood had then leisure to consider how much there might prudently be in his power to do for them. He was not an ill disposed young man, unless to be rather cold hearted and rather selfish is to be ill disposed, but he was in general well respected, for he conducted himself with propriety in the discharge of his ordinary duties. Had he married a more amicable woman, he might have been made still more respectable than he was. He might even have been made amiable himself, for he was very young when he married and very fond of his wife. But Mrs. John Dashwood was a strong caricature of himself, more narrow minded and selfish. When he gave his promise to his father, he meditated within himself to increase the fortunes of his sisters by the present of £1,000 apiece. He then really thought himself equal to it. The prospect of 4,000 a year in addition to his present income, besides the remaining half of his own mother's fortune, warmed his heart and made him feel capable of generosity. Yes, he would give them £3,000. It would be liberal and handsome. It would be enough to make them completely easy. £3,000. He could spare so considerable a sum with little convenience. He thought of it all day long, and for many days successively, and he did not repent. No sooner was his father's funeral over than Mrs. John Dashwood, without sending any notice of her intention to her mother-in-law, arrived with her child and their attendants. No one could dispute her right to come. The house was her husband's from the moment of his father's decease. But the indelicacy, oh wow, it's a very beautiful word, indelicacy of her conduct was so much the greater, and to a woman in Mrs. Dashwood's situation, with only common feelings, must have been highly unpleasing. But in her mind there was a sense of honor so keen, a generosity so romantic, that any offense of that kind, by whomsoever given or received, was to her a source of immovable disgust. Mrs. John Dashwood was never been a favorite of any of her husband's family, but she had had no opportunity till the present of showing them with how little attention to the comfort of other people she could act when occasion required it. So, of a spoiler alert, she is a I mean, not villain, but she is the pin. I mean, which actually made things a little bit twisted. So she is a character. So accurately, did Mrs. Dashwood feel this ungracious behavior, and so earnestly did she despise her daughter-in-law for it, that on the arrival of the latter she would have quitted the house for ever. Had not the entreaty of her eldest girl induced her first to reflect on the propriety of going, and her own rendered love for all her three children determined her afterwards to stay, and for their sakes avoid a breach with their brother. Eleanor, this eldest daughter, whose advice was so effectual, possessed a strength of understanding and coolness of judgment, which qualified her, though only 19, to be the counsellor of her mother, and enabled her frequently to counteract, to the advantage of them all, the eagerness of mind in Mrs. Dashwood, which must generally have led to imprudence. She had an excellent heart, her disposition was affectionate, and her feelings were strong, but she knew how to govern them. It was a knowledge which her mother had yet to learn, and which one of her sisters had resolved never to be taught. Marian's abilities were in many respects quite equal to Eleanor's. So Marian is the second daughter. She was sensible and clever, but eager in everything. Her sorrows, her joys could have no moderation. She was generous, amiable, interesting. She was everything but prudent. The resemblance between her and her mother was strikingly great. I mean, they both quite similar. Eleanor saw with concern the excess of her sister's sensibility, but by Mrs. Dashwood it was valued and cherished. They encouraged each other now in the violence of their sorry, affliction. Wow, one word. The agony of grief which overpowered them at first was voluntarily renewed, was sought for, was created again and again. They gave themselves up wholly to their sorrow, seeking increase of wretchedness in every reflection that could afford it, and resolved against ever admitting consolation in future. Eleanor, too, was deeply afflicted, but still she could struggle, she could exert herself, she could consult with her brother, could receive her sister in law on her arrival and treat her with proper attention, and could strive to rouse her mother to similar exertion, and encouraged her to similar forbearance, which is again coming. Margaret, the youngest one. The other sister was a good humored, well disposed girl, but as she had already imbibed a good deal of Marian's romance without having much of her sense, she did not, at 13, bid fair to equal her sisters at a more advanced period of life. So, the advanced period of life was the last line or last pair of words of the first chapter of Sense and Sensibility by Jane Austen. I will keep continuing as I was a bit carried away when I read books. I cannot stop myself. That's one of the best flaws in me. So I hope you have enjoyed it. Even though you don't enjoyed it, I cannot really say because I cannot really say. Even if you watch it, I would really love it because it's gonna be 30 minutes long because I'm gonna explain what I have read so far. It's a family picture. It's just one uncle dies, and uncle give her his fortune, his estate, his wealth, his property to his nephew and nephew's son. But that nephew has three daughters. So three daughters need some money too to stay affluently. But the son who the nephew has, he already owned so much from his dead mother or mother's property. So he didn't really need anything, but yet it is a man led society. It was a man led society indeed. So the man thought it would be better used, better distributed if the wealth goes to a man. So you can sense the sensibility here has nothing. So we will continue with the sense and sensibility, and we will try to understand what actually happened, what's actually happening, and you can imagine what you can imagine, or you, if you want to, because John Dashwood is really a dashing person. So you can imagine that as well. I hope you will, maybe you will not like it, or maybe you will like it, or you would love to join me. If anyone, any of you want to continue with this chapter number 2, I will post the picture in the comment section, and you can read from the pictures there, or you can text me that I want to continue with the reading, and I will let you know when you can continue. So I'm on bed because I'm going to sleep. And good night for myself, even though it's not good night, it's already good morning. It's yeah. If you're listening from Bangladesh, which most of my friends are, you can understand it's already morning, nearly 9 o'clock, and here it's nearly 4 o'clock in the morning, and so I'm going to sleep and have a very good night. I'm going to have a very good night sleep because I read, and I actually read another book as well, which I was reading. But I started my book club with the most feminist writer in the history, Jane Austen, and I love her writing. And no, I watched that movie, and which inspired me to do it today. And please remind me to post the videos, continue with the book club, continue with the reading. Actually, I'm saying it a book club. It's actually a, yes, it's a book club. Book club is for a discussion, having discussions with the books and everything. But I will keep reading. It's a reading club as well, like reading. I mean, all together, whatever you want to do with the books, it's here. Okay, just join me. Okay, see you again. Take care. Till then, uh, I I was going to do that. That's from the movie String. It's a corn movie, so you can watch it as well if you want to. It's a very good movie though. It's a very teachable movie. But I'll take your leave. Okay. Good night. Good night from my side. Good morning to you, and have a very good day. See you again.